Dawson Rider with you.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here with my review of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers issue 26, the official second part of Shattered Grid. So we pick up, we mainly do pick up with the aftermath of last time, but we actually start off with Drakon reuniting with his forces in the world of the Coinless, his Sentries, and Finster 5, and they actually share like a hug, like they're good friends. That was just kind of surprising. Added a little bit of humanity to Drakon, I guess. Maybe I just haven't picked up on anything, but he's been pretty straightforward cold. So that was just kind of an interesting beat. And like, so we kind of reunite with that, and him sort of, you know, alluding to the fact that he wants to go about this plan of, you know, conquering everyone and stuff like that. And then we pick up with the aftermath of what happened to Tommy, and then we find out basically right now that he's off, you know, he's officially off the board. He's not going to be able to be revived by the Morphin Grid or something like that. I'm still not going to say that he'll never come back. Right now I don't think he'll come back in Shattered Grid, but I could see them bringing him back later. I'm just not going to rule it out. This is comics, you know, crazy stuff happens all the time. We don't know. Like, I know for now it's real, but it's still, you know, I'm not going to rule it out. Comics, all stuff is reversed and re-reversed and re-reversed all the time, so we don't know. And they talked a lot about the Morphin Grid and how it could be useful, and even though they ruled it out, just that kind of raised a red flag for me of like, I feel like that'll come back later somehow, even if it's like almost Force Ghost or something. I don't know. It just seemed like maybe they were just trying to hammer home that they couldn't use the Morphin Grid to help. That's why they brought it up so much. But usually when series call out something like that, it comes back later at some point. So I don't know. I don't want to dwell too much on that because I definitely think it was an interesting thing. But as I said last week, or last review, I just definitely don't hope that they don't use this as a type of way to make it seem like good storytelling is taking out Rangers for shock value, basically. So we'll see. But then we get right into it with Jen waking up. I don't know why she was asleep, but maybe she was just sleeping in general. That's what I remember. I don't know. But she's like basically explaining to them the sitch. Now here's where it gets confusing for me. So last week, or I keep saying last week, but in the last video, and the last couple of videos when I talked about this, I was kind of confused about whether the other teams they were going to be meeting were from the show timeline or whether they were from the MMPR comic timeline. And also confused about MMPR Pink because White Rangers seem to be alive in there, Tommy. And so people said that that's not canon, although you could assume that that was from this comic timeline had it not been interrupted by what Drakon just did. But that's here nor there. But then everyone's like, no, no, no. Like, everyone at Boom was like, these Rangers are from the show being plucked out of their season, which didn't make sense for me for Time Force, because why would Wes be in the future? Unless I'm misremembering it, he at no point ever went to the future. So that's already, unless it was past the series, which Samurai seems to be. But anyway, but then Jen said, I was from this timeline, and that means the MMPR comic timeline. So is she just from the Boom timeline, and all the other ones are from the show timeline? For right now, I'm going to assume that this Jen is a Jen from the comic timeline, and like the Samurai Rangers and the others we're going to be meeting are from the show timeline. I don't know. It just needlessly confused me a little bit. My preference is, as I said last week, I just want all the teams to be from the MMPR comic timeline because they're similar yet different, and it allows us to still see the cool, like, hey, Jen's gonna get to meet this person, but also we get to see what Boom's take on it would be. I mean, obviously right now, even with presumably Jen being from the Boom timeline, she's not that different. I mean, the only difference we've seen is that Wes was for some reason in the future at an outpost. But I don't know. But I just don't know why they needed to make that so needlessly confusing, because for me there's really no value in them being from the show, because it's not like I'm going to get to see these fun interactions with the actors. I'd rather them be from the Boom timeline. I think that gives them more freedom. But we'll see. But for now, that's what I'm assuming. And she sort of explained to them, like, this is, normally I wouldn't show you this, but this is a timeline of all the Ranger teams that come after you. And she inflates the ego, like, oh, you're the greats that everyone aspires to. I'm like, maybe you guys, but, you know, the 90s guys, no one will ever let go of that, even though they weren't that great. But what I found interesting is when she shows the timeline, it shows like a timeline of the logos. And it looked to me, it was kind of interrupted by one of the speech bubbles, but it looked to me that they went like Lightspeed, Wild Force, Ninja Storm, and omitted Time Force because they're from the future. But then they put SPD between Mystic Force and Dino Thunder. Again, if this is the Boom timeline, then maybe it's different. But just going by the show timeline, for me, it would make more sense to actually include Time Force between Wild Force and Ninja Storm wait, between Lightspeed Rescue and Wild Force, because they technically did fight in 2001, even though they're from the future, so they would be both. But SPD is supposed to take place in 2025, so they, except for the team up, they never fought in 2004, 2005, so that's like a super nerdy thing, like, well, actually, they wouldn't be there in the timeline. But I don't know, because I remember looking, I was like literally looking at it goes, I'm like, oh, that's neat that they kind of excluded Time Force because it's from the future, and I'm like, wait, SPD's right in there. But that was like something I got hung up on way too long, both in the video and when I was reading it. But then I like the way they explained the way the Shattered Grid bit is working, where she said, like, picture, like, because she said, right now this is all one timeline, but they got shattered, and she said, picture it like a mirror, it's all one universe, but then when it's shattered, you know, the individual pieces are still intact. So that's the way she described it, as like, now this shattering has put all these teams into their own little pocket dimensions. So yeah, describing them as like sort of being fractured into pocket dimensions, like for example Samurai, who we see in this episode, they're part of the main PR world, but because of this fracturing they now kind of exist separately just because of this, you know. So they explain that actually pretty cleanly. I'm just confused. Honestly, the only thing that's confusing me is the relation to the show and the comic. Again, I think just for simplicity and for my own personal reasons, I'd like to see it just be Boom. And then you just bring show people in for stuff like that Forever Black thing or whatever. I don't know. But I like the way they describe that cleanly. Then we flash over, we get to see the Samurai Rangers training and Drakon attacks them. And this seems to be, unless I'm just misreading it, I'm going to reread it again, but that it seems to be taking place post-series, because they're like, oh, we defeated the Nihilak before, we're going to defeat him again, so they've reassembled with Lauren as the leader again. That's what it seemed to me. But Drakon attacks, he takes their morphers, Lauren's kind of on the run, and the other Rangers arrive to save her, and they escape. And then we see, it was a really cool, before I get to this other part, we get to see this really cool panel of, like, all the Rangers teleporting out, and it's like the 5 MMPRs with Jen and Samurai Red on the side, and it was really cool just to see, but also just the style of it was really neat. And I like how they're almost doing this, like, it kind of reminds me in a way of like the old Sentai teams, or like One-Eye Ranger, where they would pick like different people to create this sort of like, you know, highlight Rangers from each season to bring in on that. And then we get to see this really cool bit where we see why, or at least one of the aspects of Drakon's plan is he essentially is absorbing Ranger powers more. Like, he tunes into the Samurai Morphers, and actually, wait, they're because Samurai Morphers is Golds. Samurizers. And he, like, absorbs them, and it changes his suit a little bit. It made his suit a little more angular. You get a little bit of that, like, distinct sort of collared look that the Samurai Rangers have, as like a triangle, and he got like a samurai sword. That's something that I can definitely see what people would say is fanficky, but it's really cool to see. Like, I think it's a neat aspect that, it's like, again, some of the stuff people call fanfic, I feel, is just stuff that they can do when they're not reliant on somebody else's work. You know, they can, oh, we want to make this? Oh, there's no Sentai suit? Who cares? Let's draw it in. But I think that was cool. I'll be interested to see how that goes with what other teams see. I don't think we'll get to see him absorb an aspect of every team, although that might be interesting to see how they would do that. But it was a really cool thing to see. And he also explained that, like, every power set, like, because Finster was like, oh, why don't you absorb everyone else? And he's like, oh, I only need one, because every Morpher draws from, like, the same source. So it's kind of like same OS, different settings. Although I'm curious how that works with 6 Rangers, because oftentimes they're different. So theoretically, he could absorb the Samurizers and the Gold Ranger's Samurai Morpher, especially since Antonio built them on his own. But that's I'm getting hung up on these small details. But it was cool to see, and then not only with that, we didn't get to see the suit in this week's episode, but we got to see like the origins of the previews we saw for like the Blue Samurai sentries, because he's like, I don't need to absorb the rest, but we can certainly use them to make more sentries. And if you were paying attention to the like the previews and stuff, we saw Blue Samurai Sentry and Green Zeo. I feel like those were the only ones from other teams. We might see more. I'd love to see more, but that was really cool. So we sort of got the first nugget of that. And then at the end, well, that was pretty much the end of the main comic, and then we got another little addition to the Blue Centurion and Ninja story, but this was mainly the Blue Centurion like at his precinct 9-9, but it was pretty cool to see because you had like other Blue Centurion like robots and like his angry police captain that looks like a robo, J. Jonah Jameson, and he's sort of, you know, ostracized might be too extreme a word, but like put out there for having a crazy theory about the Power Rangers being involved in this. So that was was really short, obviously, because this is like the end little bits, but it was really cool to see something just like more Blue Centurions, basically, in the precinct. That was really cool, small, little detailed world building stuff that I like that these comics do. The only other thing I wanted to mention, which just to rewind a little bit, we did get to see that Jason's wearing the Gold Ranger armor, and I think that's really cool. Gold Ranger. No, that's totally different. Green Ranger armor, just like in the show. But it gives it a cooler meaning with this, a little bit deeper meaning than just, I ran out of batteries here, take this before the charge is up. But I actually really hope that for the remainder of the run, that he wears that as the Red Ranger. I think it makes sense. Why would you not wear a power-up all the time? And the Green Ranger powers aren't damaged. Like, you know, they're not drained or green candled or anything. So really, there's no reason why not to. And I think it would be a cool addition that makes him stand out, and that's really neat. I might do a video on some speculation of where the series might go after Shattered Grid based on Tommy not being in the series anymore and Jason's role and how they might incorporate Rocky and Adam and Aisha and stuff. Because I had some ideas about where I might go and where I thought it was going to go, or where I would have liked to have seen it if Tommy was still a main character. But I might do a separate video on that between issues at some point. But I thought that was a nice little detail with the red armor. Speaking of, I don't remember if I mentioned this in the last review, but like after issue 25 came out, they like re-released a preview cover which featured Red Ranger and Samurai Lauren fighting the Gearbots. I think they were from RPM, I can't remember, and Dr. K was there too. And it was just regular red, and then after the issue 25 big twist, they redid it with the gold armor because it was a spoiler. To be honest, I don't know about you guys. Let me know, I'm curious, whether if they would have released that cover with golden armor Jason, would you have thought the worst with Tommy? Honestly, if they would have released that cover, I would have thought nothing of it, because either I thought, okay, Tommy's letting him borrow it, or it's just for the cover. Because there's lots of covers that really have nothing to do with the story, because, like, they might have nothing to do with the Boom Universe story. Sometimes they're just for fun covers. Like MMPR issue 8's Hyperforce cover. Hyperforce was not in that issue, so I would have just seen it as a cover, or just, oh yeah, Tommy probably lent him the armor for some reason. Because, like, literally we had a story arc a little while back when he gave him, they shared the green energy. So, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of stupid because the Red Ranger armor is such a famous look anyway. It's one of the most popular suits. They release figures for it all the time. So I wouldn't have seen it as a spoiler. But anyway, that was like a little mini end, like, inquiry. But overall, solid second issue. I would give it an 8. I think MMPR Go-Go Power Rangers comes out next. I'm pretty sure. Like, we have Go-Go Power Rangers, we have the annual coming up, and then obviously 27 after 26, obviously. So much to look forward to. I'll be covering all of it. I'm really excited about all this. But anyway, until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Dawson Rider, signing out.